Selflessness is difficult to see and to realize because it's so counterintuitive, since we have this very strong sense of self that is baked into our very being, right? And there's a few perplexing questions that arise if we are to accept that the self is indeed an illusion. If there is no self to whom things are happening, then who is it that is listening to this course? Who feels emotions, has memories? What does it mean to say that there's no self? In thinking about this, it might be quite unsettling. That is why it has to be experienced first in order to be understood fully. While you may understand vaguely the concept of selflessness as you're listening to me at this very moment, and I could go on and on about this, you won't know what it feels like to lose this sense of self and experience the transformative insights born of it, unless you experience it yourself. As the observing power of your mind gets stronger, as your awareness sharpens and stabilizes, you will slowly discover how most of us are imprisoned in this conventional idea of self. And the reason is called perception. The function of perception is to recognize. That is, it picks out the distinguishing marks of different experiences, creates concepts around them, associations, and then form recognition that is essentially stored in our memory. So for example, when we hear a particular sound, we think car, or plane, or baby, or whatever it is. In the markets, when we see markets moving up or down, we think win, or loss. And if we think loss, we think hurt, pain. So you see, that concept of car, plane, baby, or market movement is arising out of our perception of sound or sight or other sensory inputs. So we first recognize the quality of the sound or sight, and we name it in a particular way: bird, truck, plane, green candle, red candle, and then we associate a feeling to it: good, bad, right, wrong, want, doesn't want, pleasant, unpleasant. There are endless, innumerable examples of this. This is happening all the time in our lives. This process of seeing, associating, recognizing, and then replaying again. We recognize men, women, different colors, sound, different experiences, painful ones, pleasant ones. Everything in our world, really. We create concepts and then we store them in our memory for later use. This is how we construct the whole world around us. We construct it through perception. So perception is everything, because our perception ultimately becomes the world we inhabit. The representation of the world you have inside your head, and in the case of trading, the way you think of markets, the way you think of losses or profits, all of that is just that. It's a representation. It's not actually the real thing. It's how you perceive it. Now, how is that true, and why is it important? I'd like you to imagine a scenario where you wake up in the morning and you witness a huge gap down in the markets, way below your stop. The gap is so large that your trading account is reduced to rubbles. I know, pretty extreme, but I'm just trying to make a point. Okay, so you're traumatized for life. Now imagine another trader going through that same exact ordeal. His response, however, is almost opposite to yours. The guy or gal feel almost liberated by such an event and decides that this is a great chance to start anew. Again, it's exactly the same event, but two radically different responses. So what is happening there? You see, the way people perceive reality is subjective, and it's going to differ from person to person. And insofar as it differs, it pinpoints the very reason why some people seem to be more positive than others, more resilient in the face of vicissitudes, happier, and so on and so forth, given the same experiences. Again, it's just their perception of the experience that is different. In the world, we are constantly bombarded with all kinds of information coming to our five senses. The best estimate I've read recently is that there are 6 billion bits per second worth of information available to our senses on a moment-to-moment basis. The research also tells us that our brain has a limited amount of information it can perceive at a conscious level. And that number is a mere 134 bits per second. That's a big difference, isn't it? 6 billion bits per second of information available to our senses, and only 134 bits per second get in. Not surprisingly, what that means is that there's a huge filtering activity going on. And so we develop habits in the way we think about things. We are constantly filtering information and selecting ones that already fit our worldview. One thing to understand is that nothing is inherently dual in this world. Good or bad, right or wrong, are only concepts spawn of the human mind. Reality is inherently non-dual, and so nothing is actually happening to us or for us. Life just happens, my friends, and everyone is experiencing things based on the mental map they hold of the world. And depending on how they have acquired this mental map, they might be seeing the world in detrimental ways. So there's always a different way to see something and to experience it beyond our existing perception. And it's an important thing to understand as we continue to evolve as individuals first and as traders second. There's a nice little story which illustrates this pretty well, and it's quite touching. At least it has been to me when I first heard it. In a class of first or second graders, the teacher asks, "What color are apples?" Most of the children in the class say red, yellow, golden, or green. Then a little boy raises his hand and says white. The teacher looks surprised and says, "There are no white apples. You must be thinking of something else." But the young boy insistently says, "No, apples are white." And the teacher gets a little bit firm after a while and says, "No, that is not correct." Finally, the little boy says, "Well, when you cut the apple open, it's white." As we see, this very special child has a very wonderful way of openness to the world around him. And so he can see things differently. He isn't trapped by the habit of perception. So he is able to stay open to other information that comes to his senses, not just the one he already holds about the world. If we can just cultivate such an openness, we might begin to see our trading losses differently, even perhaps the markets in unconventional ways. So this is why two people can experience the exact same circumstances in life and take something completely different out of it. A string of loss, let's say, might make one trader an emotional mess, while that very same experience can prompt another trader to better himself, to improve his game. Okay, listen, we're not always in control of what's happening to us in the markets or in life, and that is a fact. You may be robbed of hard-earned profits, or you may be blessed with additional gains, and some combination of the two will always happen as you keep trading. But that's not really the point. The point is, if you feel like you're constantly struggling, then you live in a world that's all about constantly struggling. And if you feel like you're constantly being blessed, then you live in a world that's all about constantly being blessed. Either way, through your thoughts and behavior in the present, you're always choosing to cultivate a state over the other. What we see when we interpret the world and the situations we find ourselves in is only a reflection of what's inside of us. It's a mirror that casts back to us our own reflection. And this is something I think is important to reflect upon.